Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, we're playing tourist. First of all, Egypt, post-revolution, where they're reaching back into history to bring back the tourists. In the Philippines, and how that ongoing dispute over the South China Sea is keeping Chinese tourists away. And of course, London, the Olympics are in town and there's a packet to be made. But why are people leaving their homes during the Games? So as you see, we're going to take you on holiday this week on Counting the Cost. Lots of stories to tell. After all, tourism is the biggest service industry in the world, and we're right in the middle of peak season. In fact, between May and August, that's summer of course in the Northern Hemisphere, some 415 million tourists are expected to travel on their holidays. Where? Well, the top 5 destinations last year, and this is in terms of number of visitors, were Italy, 46 million there, Spain, 56.5 million, China got 1 million more on top of that in third place, the United States in second with over 62 million, and at the top of the list, it's France, 79.5 million visitors. Down the other end of the scale though, the Middle East and North Africa, which took a massive hit of course because of the Arab Spring, losing about 5 million tourists last year. That's where we're focusing, Egypt, where there are signs of a recovery. The number of tourists jumped 29% between January and May this year, compared to the same period a year ago when the revolution still dominated the headlines. Here's Jacky Rowland first up with a look at some of the efforts being made to bring the tourists back to Egypt.
Among the 7 wonders of the ancient world, these giant tombs of the pharaohs continue to fascinate and mystify thousands of years after they were built. The Ministry of Antiquities has embarked on a big project to clear away sand and expose more tombs. It's hoped this will make the site more attractive to foreign visitors.
The people who come to see the pyramid, normally they go inside the pyramid, walk around, that's it. We want to open some other tombs to grab more people to come for the second and the third time to see something different.
This is the first new tomb that will be opened to the public. We're invited in for a preview. Queen Mercianch III was buried here. With its vivid colours, it's believed to be the best preserved tomb in this burial ground.
This tomb, it's cut inside the rock. All or most of the tomb in Giza, it may be built, or most of it may be built from up the mountains.
Since the revolution, there's a new desire to involve surrounding communities in these historical sites. Local people are learning handicrafts so that they can benefit as tourism starts to pick up. A big change from how the old regime used to manage the pyramids.
They used to put fences and to build fences around this site, which is completely crazy because the people felt that they are separated from their own heritage.
There's little doubt that Egypt has some of the richest cultural heritage in the world. The challenge is to get the most out of it, while at the same time preserving these wonders for future generations.
Let's take an even closer look at this, shall we, with Toby Nicol. He is with the World Travel and Tourism Council, joining us from London. Toby, thank you for your time. I think Egypt is a really great case study for us here for what we want to talk about, because it's got everything. It's got all the history, it's got these amazing sites, the pyramids, which people want to come to see. But then you throw in the sort of political and social unrest which we've seen, and it can end up counting for nothing. How do you bring the people back?
I think Egypt is doing probably the right thing at the moment, which is to spend a lot of money on advertising. Over the course of the last few years or so, what we've seen is social unrest in some places and physical unrest in others. You look at what happened in Japan with the earthquake, the tsunami and the resulting nuclear disaster just over a year or so ago. Wherever you look, there's something going on. And there are various attributes which countries which respond successfully to that have got. And basically, getting people back, the hotels discounting, putting people back on planes again, but particularly the local tourism boards and the local government simply spending money on advertising is a very good way of just rebuilding confidence. So basically, Egypt is beginning to do the right things, and I think they're beginning to see that now in the return of tourists to the country.
So you could almost view it like when the stock price of a company falls, and it's of course viewed negatively, but then equally it could be seen as a chance to pick up a bargain.
Yeah, that's right. If you're, it's a good analogy. If you're a company and you have bad news, your stock price falls, what you as a company would then do is to think, okay, where is the good news which is coming in our organisation? And you as an organisation choose to put that out. And over time, the impact of the bad news begins to fall. Also, for investors, to use your point, again, there's a good price to be had. It could be that it's a good company, but the shares are just slightly discounted. And right now, there's a lot of people who are travelling to Egypt, getting great holidays, particularly in the Nile area, on Nile cruises, and in the Red Sea, where there's great bargains to be had out there. That's all about Egypt as a country getting people back in. It's the equivalent, to continue the analogy, simply of people snapping up a bargain of cheap shares after a profit warning.
But do you see a negative side to that at all? Just something you said there reminded me of, and I know it's a different sort of place, but Sri Lanka, which we know anecdotally has seen a big increase in tourism because, of course, the end of the civil war there a few years ago. I don't want to say it's exploiting it, but the idea of people there who've seen a lot of tough times, they're really struggling, and then the tourists just kind of come in and capitalise. I know it helps the local population, but is there an element of taking advantage there?
Well, I think something like Sri Lanka is fractionally different because for many, many years, some decades, tourism in Sri Lanka was unnaturally suppressed by the civil war which took place over there. In Egypt, it's one of the most popular tourism destinations on earth. Tourism accounts for about 15% of their entire gross domestic product and about 13% of all jobs. Those are way above global averages. And what's happening, it's very, very clear. People are looking for bargains. And if, as a country, you've got two options. People don't come back, or they come back because it's cheap. Most countries, in fact, probably every single country in the world, would take the latter. They want people back. And once you, just like any business, once you begin to sell a product to some people, you can then begin to raise the price. It's simple supply and demand. The supply has always been there, but demand simply fell off a cliff in the last 15 months or so. And the Egyptians, the businesses which run their businesses there, they're looking for anything to get people back.
More broadly then, Toby, let's widen things out and talk about the global tourism industry in the midst of what is still a global economic downturn. How would you say the industry has held up over the last few years? You would think that the luxury of tourism and travelling abroad might have to be one of the first things to go in tough economic times.
Travel and tourism is a slightly interesting industry because over the course of the last few decades it's shown itself to be remarkably resilient. In very, very broad terms, travel and tourism grows at roughly twice the rate of inflation globally. So if you look at inflation at the moment being 1.5% to 2% globally, travel and tourism is growing at roughly twice the rate of that. And that's because people do want to travel. People are incredibly reluctant to give up their main family holidays each year, wherever you are in the world. That's what all the history has shown in the last couple of decades. On top of that, businesses still want to travel. Yeah, for sure. Companies want to spend less on travel. But when they do, there is still the benefit of going face to face. And that's why year in, year out, despite all the economic and social turmoil we've seen in the last few years or so, people are still getting on planes, they're still going on holiday, they're still doing business with one another face to face.
All right, Toby Nicol there from the World Travel and Tourism Council. Thanks for your time.
That's a pleasure. No, thank you.
And still ahead on Counting the Cost, yet more anger in Spain, where protesters say they just can't afford the budget cuts and tax hikes the government has in store for them. But are their protests making any difference? Right now, though, we're looking at Asia and a case of external pressure impacting on tourism rather than the internal type we saw in Egypt earlier. Specifically, we're looking at the Philippines, where the Chinese government is telling its citizens to stay away from because of a dispute over territory in the South China Sea. It is the small Philippine island of Boracay, a tourist spot just south of Manila, where trade is really suffering. This now from Jamila Alandogan.
Ni hao ma, Heidi Mambo.
Bobby Paborito says the last few months have not been easy. He's been working as a tour guide in the world-famous island of Boracay in western Philippines for the past 10 years. He says most of his clients had been Chinese and used to make about $50 a day. But he hasn't seen many of them for months.
I've
lost about 80% of my guests. I've been standing here over a week. Not a single client for me so far.
Officials in China have ordered travel agencies to suspend their tours on the island as tensions between the two nations escalate. Both countries have a claim over the Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. The dispute has hurt the island's economy, which reportedly lost over 200,000 Chinese tourists just barely a month after the travel advisory was put in place. There may have been setbacks over the last few months, but many tour and hotel operators here in the island say they remain hopeful the political wrangling between the two countries will end soon. The Philippine government has remained defiant, reiterating that tourism on the island can thrive even without Chinese tourists. The number of visitors from Korea, Taiwan, and Russia has almost doubled over the last 5 years.
Everyone needs this dispute to be resolved immediately as much as possible, because precisely it's a pain in our economy. But of course, we have to also to defend our own territory.
There are still some Chinese tourists who come to the island despite the ban. The local government reported that over 1,500 visited last month, most of them flying in through Hong Kong. Chinese and Philippine officials have repeatedly said they back peaceful means to resolve the dispute. Bobby Paborito says the diplomatic back and forth between the two governments won't make much difference to his life for now. But he hopes it will lead to an agreement which will make it easier for more Chinese tourists to visit the island.
Now, you would have heard Jamila mention the Scarborough Shoal in that report, and just to show you what and where that is and then how it fits into this whole picture. Have a look. It's in the South China Sea, obviously. This is where it's estimated there are billions, perhaps more than 200 billion barrels of oil. It's far closer to the Philippines than it is to China, but China claims the whole sea as its territory. Also, you've got China's neighbours, Vietnam, and then Brunei, Malaysia, and Taiwan also claiming parts of the South China Sea. So you see, it's all quite far-reaching, but this China-Philippines standoff is where we're focusing. We've got Edzal Tupaz joining us from Manila. He is a Harvard Law School graduate and a professor of comparative and international law. Edzal, thank you for your time. We're talking about a highly disputed area here. If China says to its people, don't go to the Philippines, don't go to Boracay Island, what sort of impact are we talking about? Is it an effective thing, if I can use that term, an effective thing for China to be doing for its means?
Yeah, on the supply side, meaning on the Chinese side, the flexing of soft economic power has been effective. There has been a directive since May of this year, following the gunboat standoff in April, from the Tourism Department of China to simply tell all Chinese travel agencies to stop issuing tickets and other travel packages for Chinese mainland residents to the Philippines. And it seems that there has been compliance to that. That basically hit our tourist market, speaking on the demand side, not in any insignificant term, because about 9% of our total tourist traffic or tourist population at any given day would come from mainland China. This doesn't count numbers from Hong Kong or Taiwan. But about 9%. The Chinese tourists would probably comprise or would rank within the fourth or fifth tier of among our top 5 what we call classes of tourists.
Just a quick word, if you don't mind, Edzal, on what's outside of tourism, if we were to remove it from the economic equation. You know, not to put too fine a point on things here, but there does appear to be a lot of oil in this South China Sea region, which of course will contribute to why there is so much tension. You know, because really the riches could be fantastic for whoever does land any territorial rights.
Yeah, absolutely. As you would see, China is getting hungrier by the year or in time with raw materials and resources. In fact, it's unstated, but fairly well recognized that China is actually increasingly outsourcing a lot of its production side to the Philippines. So in terms of minerals, precious metals, and oil and natural gases, it would be unexpected. It would not be surprising at all that China would try to sort of expand its presence and would go through some length to expand its economic input. And China seems bent on its bilateral approach, meaning, it would rather handle any sort of economic dispute on a one-to-one basis. But I think that's inherently flawed, because you have at least 6 claimants over the Spratlys, and then the Scarborough is another issue altogether. But the Spratlys, taken by themselves, is an inherently multilateral problem and would implicate background norms on international law, despite or regardless of what the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas would say, whether or not China's bound by the compulsory jurisdiction of the UNCLOS tribunals or the UNCLOS courts, and so forth. But Beijing must recognize that the Spratlys question, which is an oil question, and you're right on that, is inherently a multilateral problem.
All right, Edzell Tupaz there in Manila. Good talking to you. Thank you for joining us. Now to another holiday hotspot with problems that compound the ongoing Eurozone crisis. We're talking about Spain, of course, where tens of thousands of people have been out on the streets in 80 cities protesting against pay cuts and tax hikes. The government calls them cuts, as it would, but the country's main labour unions reckon they're robbery. This from Paul Brennan in Madrid.
Pensioners, police, teachers, government staff, firefighters, bus drivers, union members and those with no union affiliation at all. Tens of thousands of people for whom protest has become a necessity rather than a mere expression of dissent.
Less than a month ago, the anti-austerity protest movement appeared exhausted and demoralised. But in the last week, it seems re-energised, revitalised. And just look at the response, perhaps the biggest protest yet in the streets of Madrid.
Pilar Gil is not a natural demonstrator. Now 58, she was looking forward to retiring after nearly 30 years in the public sector. But the cuts have hit her hard.
Why am I so upset? I'm upset because the cutbacks aren't taking us anywhere. In my wages, we're talking about a loss of 200 euros every month. And because I'm not a highly paid executive, I really feel it.
It is the public sector workers who are being hit hardest by Spain's austerity programme. Job losses, pay cuts and cancelled bonuses have produced bitter resentment. Earlier on Thursday, in a show of coordinated resistance, government workers logged off their computers at 12 noon and walked out. Even management threats don't deter them anymore.
Yesterday told us he's going not to pay us our salary next month if we continue protest.
And what do you say to them?
Continue.
Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy has been unmoved by the public protest as he pursues a programme to cut the public deficit by $80 billion in 2 years. Spain's economy is in serious trouble. Nearly 1 in 4 Spaniards are unemployed. 8.95% of Spanish bank loans are now looking doubtful for repayment. And the cost of servicing Spain's public debt is rising. Bond yields up again on Thursday. But such abstract concepts hold little water with the people on the streets. They are struggling with reduced wages, higher taxes and seriously diminished prospects. People here are starting to talk about Spain becoming ungovernable.
Now our final destination this week is London, where of course Olympic athletes and officials have been pouring in all week. And then of course there's all the tourists and the spectators on top of that, providing more than a few opportunities for locals to make a buck, or a pound as it were. According to industry website Travel Click, hotel room rates in London are double what they were last year, about $300 a night on average. And then also for some people living in the city, there's a chance to move out for the duration of the Games and make it work for them. Have a look at this now from Jessica Baldwin.
This East London apartment is perfect for an active 1-year-old. Situated just 2 subway stops from the Olympic Park, it's also perfect for the Olympic visitors. So Magnus, his mother and father are moving out.
I think the games are going to be a lot of fun, but we also both thought London would be pretty hectic. And my parents are based in Canada, and they were really keen for us to come back over the summer, and this was a really good way of blocking out a couple of weeks so we could go and see them.
Annabelle used an online website and quickly found a taker. Now she and her family are off to Canada with all expenses paid by the rental income.
Annabelle is renting her house to an American couple who'll watch their daughter play water polo. The cost is just under $2,000. Bigger spenders might consider this house. It belongs to former English soccer player Sol Campbell, and it can be had for a week during the Olympics for $120,000.
The 5-bedroom house has a gym, an elevator, and views of the River Thames, plus a separate house at the back for staff. Hefty demands for a hefty budget, with rents going at a 500% premium. And the predicted windfall of gold rush Olympic rents has not materialized across London. But the East End, with its proximity to the Games, is a clear winner. Not surprising in a sprawling city known for its lengthy travel delays.
And it's interesting too to look at what people think about the economic benefit of these games. There's a Reuters poll of economists which found most of them thought Britain's first Olympics for 64 years would actually not provide a lasting economic windfall. They did think, though, it'd provide a temporary shot in the arm and maybe even allow Britain, which is in recession, to eke out some modest economic growth this quarter. Around 600,000 people are expected to visit Britain for the Olympics, but it may not have a huge overall impact. Tourism officials actually think overall overseas visitors will be about the same as last year, about 30 million people. So let's put those figures and ideas to Lawrence Bresch now. He is the marketing director for Visit Britain. Lawrence, isn't it, a little disappointing, those numbers which show there's probably going to be the same number of tourists in the UK this year as there was last year, given it's an Olympic year and all that comes with that?
Not at all. I mean, last year we had a record number of visitors. We had about 31 million visitors into the UK. And we've always been very clear about the effect of the Olympics. We think most of the benefit is actually going to come in the years after 2012, between 2013 and 2015, once people have seen the destination on their TV screens. So actually, when you look at previous Olympic host cities, there is a secret there in terms of sometimes the numbers do actually go down in Olympics year, and we would like to be the very first destination to at least hold to the same number of visitors as the previous year. And we're also optimistic that actually the numbers might go up. Already we're seeing a 5% increase up to May this year.
And how would, if London's going to manage that, how would it do that? What is going to be different in London compared with Beijing or Athens or Sydney or any of those other recent Olympic hosts?
Well, London is already an incredibly popular city, and Britain is already the 7th most visited destination in the world. So we're starting from a very strong base and huge awareness in terms of what the London offer is. But we really think that all of the activities that we've had going on this year, whether it's the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, the huge cultural festival, the likes of which we've never really seen before around an Olympics, things like the torch relay that we've got going on across the UK right now, are all going to add to the number of visitors that are coming in over the summer.
Tell me more, Lawrence, about long-term impact. You alluded to it already when you said visitors will come, they will see what London has to offer, and you think in 2013, 2014, then they'll come back again, or they'll tell their friends or whatever. What about the direct impact from the Olympics? The things that are built, the infrastructure that's put in place, how is that going to help Britain long-term? Because it needs that long-term help. It needs much more than just a quick 2-week shot in the arm.
Well, you're right about the overall tourism impact, and we expect 4 billion people to be watching this Olympics on TV, and who knows what the effect is going to be in terms of social media. This is the very first real social media game, so in terms of word of mouth about Britain, we're expecting that to spread around the world as well. But in terms of long-term legacy, well, for starters, we're going to have the biggest new urban park in Europe. Billions of pounds worth of investment have gone into the transport infrastructure. Something like £6 billion has gone into transport in London, and of course all of the accommodation that's going to be available, new accommodation for residents, but also for visitors coming to stay. Something like 10,000 new hotel rooms in London alone, let alone around the rest of the country. So this is all fantastic investment that wouldn't have happened without the games, and we hope will really help to add to the tourism product we've got.
Lawrence, Bresh, hope it all goes well for you. Thank you so much for your time today. And that is where we'll leave you for this week. If you want to get in touch with us, though, here's how you do it. Twitter's probably the easiest way, actually. You can either contact me at Kamal AJE or Al Jazeera's business editor at Abid Oliver Ali. And if you're not on Twitter, the email's always there, counting the cost at aljazeera.net. And then there is aljazeera.com/business. You head there, click on the CTC link at the top. It gets you through to all our episodes, which we put up there in full. But that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.